Okay, so following on from last week with the modelling out of boxes in different shapes, put them together, I'm going to show you very quickly how to make something like this. So just using exactly the same techniques that we covered before, extruding, connecting, and just physically moving vertices and things around, how you can make them into fairly elaborate shapes. And then join them all together. So I'm not saying this is the best sword ever made, but just for an example of how to put all these things into practice. I'm also going to show you a bit more modifiers, right? Ones that you will find very useful. I'll move the screen a bit so you actually see them. That you'll find very useful while you're modelling. So we'll just start from the beginning. So I'm going to start my sword by making this hilt here. And all I did was make it out of a box. So I'm just going to create a box. I'm going to draw it. I've hidden the ground plane because I hate it. So if you want that on, there you go, G. I hate it though because it does things like that and it's really annoying. So I'm just going to turn it off for now. G will hide it. And then I'm going to start shaping out that. So you might think, well, you take that and you'd be cut bits out. No, it's easier to start from the middle and work your way out. So I'll just start by resizing my box, and I'm going to just do that right now before I turn it into an editable poly. I'm not working to any specific size, so I'm really just kind of winging it here. So that thickness looks fine for me. So I'm going to convert to editable poly, and now I can start fiddling with it. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to do half of it, and then I'm going to use a modifier to duplicate it on the other side, and it'll save you doing it twice. It's called symmetry, and that's what it says. It'll make one side a symmetrical copy on the other side. It saves you doing everything twice, and also means you're going to have an exact copy on each side, which is quite nice. So I'm going to start by just extruding that out, and then I'm going to physically just move these vertices. So remember, just draw the box over them all, and I'm just going to start moving them into the shape that I want. So I'm not necessarily going to exactly copy the one I've got here because I just kind of winged that. So I'm just going to do the same here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab that here, extrude it out, and then just move the vertices like so. Actually, maybe move that back so it's got a bit more curve to it. And then I'll do one more, then I'm going to extrude that out here, and then again just move them with my cursor, move tool up here, move. Yeah, quite a lot of people last week saying they didn't have this, and it's because you didn't have the move tool selected. So make sure if you want to move it, move tool, rotate it, rotation tool, scale it, scale tool. And I'm kind of fine with that. I'll maybe make it come to more of a point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my scale tool here, and with those four vertices selected, if I go on Y here and push it, it just brings them all together a bit more. So getting used to this is really handy for just making things nice and neat. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And the only thing I'm going to do as well, which I added to this one, is this bit coming down here that goes into the hilt. So that's on the hilt, the pommel, or the handle, I don't know what you call it. Click on here, and then I'm just going to extrude that down as well. And then I'm just going to move that along. Oops, with my move tool. Remember, you can use W to move that in like so. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the symmetry tool to mirror that on the other side. So if you come up here, this is called the stack. Right? If you're used to playing Magic the Gathering, you will probably recognise that term. The stack. So it's basically the order in which you're putting modifiers on top of your basic mesh. In the modifier list, there are not hundreds, but there's tens of modifiers, and a lot of them you don't really need to know because you would only use them if you knew you had to use them, if that makes sense. But symmetry is one that is incredibly handy and you'll use all the time. It's all alphabetical here, so I'm just going to go down to SY for symmetry. Oh, there we go. Now that's clearly wrong, right? But you'll see here that symmetry has now appeared above editable poly. So I can go in, I can go back down to my editable poly layer, and symmetry is not active because it calculates it from the bottom up. So if you go to that layer, that hasn't happened yet, essentially. until you go there, and then it's active. So at the moment, this orange box is called a gizmo, and it is showing you what is getting mirrored. So if you imagine the orange box is a mirror, it's showing you, what's being mirrored. I don't want that there. I want it to mirror it on X that way, not on Y or Z, which it currently is. So if I go to X, you'll see it mirrored here, but I still get Z active, so I just need to turn that off, and then it'll mirror it like that. It is an incredibly handy tool. Get used to using it. And then I'm going to use another modifier called Smooth, or Turbo Smooth. So I'm just going to go to the modifier list, go down to T for Turbo Smooth, and that's going to smooth it out like that. Now obviously you can see it's kind of made it look a wee bit blobby, but I will cover how to fix that in following weeks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start by making the handle here. So I'm going to just use just a straight up primitive called a torus, right? It's basically like a donut. So if I draw it out, it doesn't have to be perfect just now. Bam. And then I'm going to use the align tool, so I mentioned last week, align. Click on here. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the object you've got selected and move it to the other object. So it's a quick way of getting things together. It doesn't attach them, it just moves them so they're sharing the same point. So the pivot point for that is going to align with the pivot point for that. Make sure you've got pivot to pivot chosen, and then X, Y, and Z. Now I'm going to move it from here, but at least now I know it's nice and centered. So I'm going to go down, and that's also maybe a wee bit little. So I'm just going to, actually no, I think that might be okay. We have a big fancy hill here. I can go in and change that as well if I want. I can go in, go back down to editable poly. If you push this wee button here, you show end result, and it still allows you to manipulate the object but see what it'll look like at the end. So if I choose vertices here, you'll see the orange box appears over the top of it. So I can just grab this here and move that down like so. I can maybe even grab the ones here and move that up. It's a bit better. And then I'm going to move this up like that, so that all fits nice and snug. I'm then going to make the handle. So I'm just going to make that out of a cylinder. I'm just going to draw it out roughly just now, and then I'm going to align it to here, so it's all in the right place. So align to the circly bit, X, Y, Z. Maybe not Z, because it's going to jump up from the pivot here up to here. See, like that, because it's aligning the pivots, not the objects. Well, and I forgot to confirm that. So I'm just going to go back to align here, X, Y, Z, apply. There you go. And now I'm just going to move that down like that. And that's a wee bit thick, I think. So I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to adjust the radius. So say I had already done this and converted to the editable poly, and then decided I want to change the size. What I would do is grab vertices, select them all, and then just use the scale tool to just move them in, like so. But I want to get this this kind of pattern on it here, so that would be quite difficult to model, right? You potentially, if you were doing that by hand, it would take ages, so I'm going to use another modifier. But what I need to do first of all is pull out these sort of bits of leather strapping that I'm going to have. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to isolate the selection. So at the moment it's going to be a bit annoying doing that with all this other stuff on screen. If I push this here, it'll isolate whatever I've got selected, so it makes it a bit easier to work with. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and extrude out every 3 of these. So I'm going to select those 3 here. Remember, I'm going to then deselect these ones here, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to Alt and deselect that. So I've only got those ones selected. And then I'm just going to extrude. That's a bit far. Let's move it back to about there. Cool. And then from above, this works much better in orthographic view here rather than perspective. I'm just going to grab that again. Now what that's done, remember, it's selected the top and the bottom ones, which I don't want. So if I'm in the top view, push Z to recenter it. Hold Alt, deselect them, extrude, And then again, I'm going to select all down here, deselect them, oops, and extrude, select, then select them, deselect them, extrude, and just all the way around, deselect them, and extrude, and then last one here, both, and extrude. So to get that, I don't need to isolate this anymore. To get that funky spin, I'm going to use a different modifier called twist. Now this isn't one that you're going to use often, but it's just an example of some of the ones that you can get. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to twist. Yeah. And then what that does is it puts the twist modifier on top of this editable poly. And if I adjust the angle, you'll see it twists it all around. You can see this orange gizmo as well, kind of giving you a preview of what's happening. So I'm just going to twist that around. Now the more you go with this, remember, the edges can't bend. So the more polygons you have, the more vertices you have, the better a result you're going to get with this. So that suits me fine. I'm then going to add another smooth on top of that. Turbo smooth. And then we get that nice twisty effect there. Like so. And if I want to rescale that, all I need to do is go back down to editable poly, grab the vertices, and I can stretch it out if I want, which I probably want to. And then if I go back here to my turbo smooth, everything just gets recalculated based on that. So that's nice. So I'm just going to move that down here. Now say you've already got a piece like that you want to duplicate, right? You could draw one out again, or you could, here's a pro tip, hold shift and move the piece. And what you'll do is you'll duplicate it. So I can just duplicate it right down to there. And obviously I should be naming these parts as I go, but I'm going to attach them all together so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm just going to create a sphere to go on the bottom. I'm going to align it. That's angle snap, that's not a line. I'm going to align it to this torus here. X, Y, Z. Apply. And then I'm just going to move that down a bit. So there you go, that'll do. And now we're going to make the blade. So I'm going to do the blade in exactly the same way as I've done with this. So I'm going to basically, I think I'm going to run out of time in a minute, but we'll see. I'm going to create a box to start with. A long, thin box. Again, I'm just eyeballing it. And I'm going to start by aligning that to the hilt. X, Y, Z. Apply. Like so. And then I'm just going to use my connect tool to reshape it. So I'm going to convert that to an editable poly. And then I'm going to select those edges there across the way, not the ones at the top, because all I want to do here is connect. And because that's perfectly straight, I can just move these edges up and down. So I'm going to move it to about there. And then I'm just going to use scale to pull that in at the top. And then the vertices down the bottom, which I can't see because they're behind here, but I know they're there. Like so. And then I can smooth that. And uh-oh, we get this thing happening at the bottom. So what's happening here is, isolate it, it's pulling in these edges here. Now if you don't want that to happen, the easiest thing to do is just delete that bottom polygon, because you don't need it, we can't see it anyway. And then when I smooth that, it'll retain its shape a bit better. So there we go, pretty basic sword, but showing you, you know, how to make something out of multiple parts. To attach it together, all I'm going to do is go to one part of it. I'm going to collapse these here so they become permanent. So I'm going to just collapse all, right click, collapse all, and then I'm just going to go to attach, and then attach, click on all the parts, and that sticks them all together into one. Now, there's obviously way more to it than this, but this is just showing you, you know, using really basic techniques, thinking about what the parts are going to be and making them all individually, and then you can stick them all together at the end. Using the modifiers, you can really speed up your work. There's a lot more to smoothing than this. There's other things you can do to make it retain its shape a bit better, look less blobby. but I'll cover all that in another class. At the moment, this is just about putting things together to make more elaborate.